Hi everybody and welcome back to Be Like Christ. In today's study we continue on in Matthew chapter 5 talking about divorce and remarriage. It was also said, "Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Now I know that of all the texts we've studied so far, this one might be the least popular of all. And the reason for that is because it's not a particularly easy command to want to follow in everybody's life. Especially with the divorce rates on the rise in this country, the church is having to deal more and more with people who are in situations of divorce and remarriage and all kinds of things. But we've got to do what the scriptures tell us to do, even when that's hard, so we can be in a right relationship with God. And there's no marriage, there's no difficult relationship that you might be in that is worth more than your soul. So let's talk about this text. Jesus is speaking to Jews here, and he tells them, you remember in the Old Testament, under the law of Moses, you were allowed to give your wife a writing of divorcement or a certificate, or essentially go and ask for divorce papers and give her those divorce papers, and then you were allowed to divorce her and marry whoever you wanted. Jesus says elsewhere that God allowed that because of the hardness of the people's hearts. But just like we've seen with murder and hatred and lust, now Jesus is going to take us up to a higher standard. He says that you are not to divorce your wife or a wife divorce her husband for any reason except for adultery, unfaithfulness. And I want to talk about the words of the text specifically because they can be a little bit tricky. He says, anyone who puts away his wife except on the ground of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery. Now that's worded a little bit differently than we would probably word it. And the question may arise, well, can someone make someone else sin? And the answer to that question from the rest of the Bible we see is no. Everyone's responsible for their own lives and their own actions, and that's what they're going to be judged for. No one's going to be able to do something to you on the day of judgment that will keep you away from God. But we still have to deal with the words of the text. What does it mean that a husband can make his wife commit adultery? I think if we keep in mind the historical context of the time period in which we're dealing, it makes a lot of sense. Back then there was no equal pay for equal work, or no feminist movement, or no empowerment of women movement. Women were not in the workplace in the same way that they are today. Some women may have had jobs in the first century, but it seems extremely rare that a woman would have a job that was capable of sustaining and providing for a family. That's why the plight of the widows was such a big deal to the New Testament church and in the Old Testament commands that God gave to his people. So if a man divorced his wife for any old reason, like he didn't like the way that she cooked, then she would be destitute and she wouldn't have anyone to provide for her, and it would be a huge temptation, obviously, to go out and to find another man to marry, even though you weren't supposed to be in that relationship. He also goes on to say that whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So you're not to put away your husband or your wife for just any old reason, and you're not to go marrying someone who is divorced just for any old reason. Now, like I said, there's a lot of people who really don't like this command because it hits them personally, and truthfully, it's a very hard command sometimes to carry out. Sometimes it requires huge sacrifices from the people who are in these situations if they want to do what's right in the eyes of God. And sometimes the sacrifice and the suffering of those people may lead us to ask questions like, why do I have to do this? Why is this command even in the Bible? It seems cruel and it seems harsh and it seems, just over the top. What's so bad about getting remarried? And so in our next video, we're actually going to address that topic and find out why it is so important to God to keep marriages together. And it's because marriage is a parable. It is a picture of a far greater covenant. Hi everybody, and thanks for tuning in. I've decided that I'm going to make my videos a little bit shorter from now on, and we'll see for a little bit how this format goes. It'll make it a little bit easier for me to film, and I think it'll make it a little bit better and more enjoyable for you as an audience. And so if you have any comments about the shorter format, leave me a comment down below. I'm going to try to keep everything under 3 minutes. So remember, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments you might have down below, like the video, and make sure to turn on notifications if you are a subscriber. That way you get notified whenever a new video comes up.